These days, it seems like furries can't agree on anything.
Did you guys know that furries this week, in an unprecedented event, are mad at something on Twitter?
Oh my god, nourishment. Thank you, Furry Fandom. That's how I thrive.
Instead of being reasonable and having discussions, they just play the call-out game and try and get each other to stop doing whatever it is that they're doing.
Somebody says something really horrible or stupid, and a bunch of people hop on to the topic because everybody either disagrees or agrees or whatever.
You don't have to like particular fursuiters, but don't tell others how to wear their suit. We don't need that kind of negativity.
Now I must say that of all the stuff that goes on the furry fandom, this is absolutely ridiculous.
I'm sorry, this is just a piss poor take through and through. This actually made me pretty upset after seeing it.
Oh, put your suit on and go have fun, you shallow cunt. Jesus Christ.
See, I have a personal problem with this person, so here's a bunch of shit I made up just to get them fucking cancelled.
That's completely fine. You're allowed to disagree with what I said. But it's like people are trying to cancel me right now because I said I didn't like an animation. Seriously?
Really, you should all stop spreading rumors, especially when you don't know whether they are true or not.
A lot of people on Twitter are trying to pinpoint exactly who did it and kind of go on a witch hunt for this person. I don't feel like that's what should really be focused for of this whole situation.
There have been allegations in the past that he's taken artwork without permission.
He was recently banned from speaking at Anthrocon due to anti-leftist or really just anti-SJW ideas.
There is literally no evidence to imply or assume that he would harass anyone.
The furry fandom is not all fun and games. There are people out there that are wanting to steal, kill, and do whatever they want.
You get these people with the intelligence of a rusty fork.
Furry Twitter is slowly turning into a bucket of crabs.
We're still fighting about stupid shit all the frickin' time, and it's really irritating. Really now? Is that necessary? No.
What is it about controversy that makes us so eager to engage with it? We seem to love talking about it. We love tweeting about it. We love making YouTube videos about it. Every controversy is its own story, but if you zoom out, if you look at the phenomenon as a whole, there's a much larger story to be told. The question is this a story that can be told in an objective way? Can we assess, quantify, and measure all the elements that make up this phenomenon? Can we really tell what's true and what's false? I would assert that the answer is yes. And today, we're going to do exactly that. So grab a Pop-Tart and buckle up, because this is going to be quite the ride. Kabba blah blah begins now. Hi there, I'm Kabba, the Corporate Fox, and welcome to the third installment of my analysis series. Today we'll be deconstructing the nature of controversy in the furry fandom, and we'll analyze the way a non-controversy was mutated into a controversy. Most of the videos on my channel are lighthearted or comedic, so for those of you who are new to this series, here's a quick rundown of what you can expect. The conclusions drawn through my analysis will always be built on objective, verifiable facts. You'll find all my research and my sources referenced below in the video description. For the videos in this series, I spend a great deal of time on research before the first word hits the script, research which, in the case of this video, took me over a month to complete and includes a deep dive into furry Twitter and a manual audit of 5,007 tweets. My hope is that the time spent on research will reinforce this video's credibility, and that you'll be able to take something valuable from the time you spent watching it. So with that little introduction out of the way, let's get started. I want to begin by talking about the current state of social media and the furry fandom. There's a lot for us to cover, so first, let's take a moment for some introspection. I'm going to show you a couple of tweets, and I'd like you to think about them as if you were seeing them on your Twitter feed right now. Think about how each of these images makes you feel, what your gut reaction is, and what actions you may or may not feel compelled to take in response. We're going to come back to these later in the video. Now, on the subject of furry drama and social media, I probably have the same reaction to it as most people do these days. I find it exhausting. We try to cope with it in lots of ways. Complain about it, point it out, make jokes or memes about it, but the one thing we can't seem to do is fix it. The relentless, persistent way it gets pushed to us on a constant basis just erodes our morale to a point where we've accepted it as the new normal. When I started my research for this video, I wanted to look back at all the furry drama from the last few years, but I had trouble recalling anything that was older than just a few months. I think it's because we go through so many of these week after week, there's just too much. It's like binge watching 10 seasons of a TV show and then trying to remember the plot of season 2, episode 3. According to a First Science study, this explosion of drama is one of the most contentious issues in the furry fandom, so we're all clearly aware that it's a problem that needs to be solved, which makes sense. Most of us don't want to live in a world where being perpetually upset is part of our day-to-day life. But there is a disconnect here. If what happens on furry social media is determined by furries as a group, and the majority of furries as a group want the drama to stop, why hasn't the problem taken care of itself? It's true that some furries do act in bad faith and are just looking to stir the pot for attention, but they're vastly outnumbered. Those bad apples are one of the pieces to this puzzle, but it's clear to me that we're missing other crucial pieces that we will need in order to see the whole picture. The truth is, the furry fandom doesn't own this problem. These patterns appear across all types of fandom communities and across non-fandom communities. It's a social media problem, a people problem, and it doesn't matter what group you belong to. If you use social media, you're going to see it. And that's not a coincidence. It's part of an intentional effort made by the prominent social media companies of today. Let's look at the longest running platform used today, Facebook.
In the past year, a number of people who actually worked for the company in its early stages have publicly turned against the product they helped create. The most famous of this group is Sean Parker, who was played by Justin Timberlake in the film The Social Network, and joined Facebook in its infancy.
If the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them to really understand it, that thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop.
Having helped create and promote the site, they're painfully aware of the ways in which it was designed to exploit basic human psychology.
We know for a fact that what all of these systems do, every single one, is it exploits our own natural tendencies in human beings to get and want feedback. And that feedback, chemically speaking, is the release of dopamine in your brain.
The site provided you with unprecedented spikes in these pleasurable chemicals, so when you haven't used it in the last few hours, your hand is subconsciously guided to steer back to Facebook and create more content in order to seek out more dopamine. That's the chemical feedback loop these former Facebook employees are referring to. And like with any drug, over time the pleasure from it wanes, and while some people decide to back out and quit right there, the vast majority engage with it more and more and more and more in order to keep upping their dosage.
This method of exploiting human behavior is consistent on all major platforms used today. And these companies are incentivized to make those processes more intelligent, more subtle, more effective the longer we use their products. And this is because those companies are fiercely competing for control of a finite resource, a resource that may surprise you.
Information consumes our attention, making it a scarce resource. We only have so many hours that we can glue ourselves to technology and the infinity of information it presents. We live in this attention economy, where you succeed by getting people to spend the most time, to allocate their attention to you or your product. And you dominate the economy if you can make people develop a habit where they spend time, to get their attention and hold it.
The dopamine triggers mentioned by Sean Parker in that first video, they're designed to make us contribute more content. Our brains are being rewired so that we feel the need to say something about everything at all times. It's what drives us to keep posting, replying, sharing, retweeting, and so on. It's a framework that rewards some of our worst impulses, especially those pertaining to outrage and controversy. So let's move on to how this relates to those problems in the furry fandom. When it comes to the various incidents of furry drama, one of the things I often notice is that a lot of people have a very different understanding of how the drama started, who they should be mad at, what the facts are, what the context is. The details are just all over the place. It's a complete mess of confusion that makes it difficult to understand whether it should be taken seriously or be ignored. This has created an environment of discussion that many people, myself included, find increasingly frustrating. So in order to find some kind of clarity in all of this mess, I chose a recent controversy to use as a sort of case study. My objective was to deconstruct the events in their entirety, and to see how well the common knowledge about them holds up to scrutiny. My assessment includes a look at how the controversy was covered by Furry YouTube, as well as a complete audit of every relevant tweet made between January 1st to October 31st of 2019. 5,007 tweets in total. So without further ado, let's get started. It all began on August 16th, 2019, with a single tweet that exploded into a week-long controversy across the entire furry fandom on Twitter. And it didn't take long before furry YouTubers were all over it.
Hi everyone, my name is Stormy the Fulf, and today I want to talk about poodling.
Poodling.
Poodling is like wearing a partial fursuit, but with exposed skin. So for example, someone wearing only a fursuit head with shorts and a t-shirt would be showing the skin on their arms, hands, and legs. That's poodling, just in case you didn't know. So the tweet in question came from the Eurofurence Twitter account. During their 2019 convention, they interviewed a couple of attendees asking them the question, what do you think about poodling? They published the video to their Twitter page, and it includes 4 interviewees who had this to say on the subject.
Well, it is something of like an expression of yourself. If people don't like it, that's the thing. But the main thing is do it yourself. Do what you want.
Okay, so nothing controversial here. This guy seems totally fine with people expressing themselves.
Ich verstehe halt bei Poodling einfach größtenteils das ganze Drama nicht drum. Wir wissen alle, was drunter ist. Ich kann nachvollziehen, wenn jemand sagt, okay, draußen in der Öffentlichkeit jetzt nicht unbedingt, aber vor allem hier im Convention-Bereich, warum nicht?
This is another reasonable take, I'd say. All fine here.
Poodling. Ich bin nicht so der Fan von Poodling. Ich bin ja allgemein ein Fan von Fullsuits. Mein Partsuits sind auch okay, manchmal sehen die ganz gut aus, manchmal sieht das auch sehr extrem komisch aus. Fell, Haut, T-Shirt ist manchmal nicht schön, finde ich. Und das ist halt auch irgendwie so ein bisschen die Illusion, die zerstört wird von dem Suit, von dem Charakter, deswegen bin ich nicht so der Fan davon.
Alright, so this person isn't a huge fan of poodling. He didn't seem like he was trying to be negative, just giving his personal opinion. Still, it didn't sit right with some people.
Well, poodling is like the worst thing I could actually imagine, because for me, poodling is like destroying the character. For me, I would like to just represent my character. Of course, in an emergency, if your body is not capable of suiting anymore, of course, it's a thing to get out of suit and stuff. But if you do poodling, it's more like on purpose and to, I don't know. I see it as a ridiculous thing and I don't like it at all.
This is the one that really set people off. It's these 2 lines in particular that really rub people the wrong way.
But he seems to think that people poodling are doing it on purpose, that like cause malicious intent.
Of everything in the fandom, including literal Nazis, people showing their human skin is the worst thing you can imagine.
Not any of the other negative things that pop up, not any of the other furry drama we've had recently regarding a certain famous fur's ulterior actions. No. This is the absolute worst thing you could imagine.
Don't be such a pretentious motherfucker, Kunora, seriously.
The immediate reaction on Twitter to Eurofrence's video was so negative that they ended up tweeting out an apology on the same day. Unfortunately, it was already too late, and the negative response was so overwhelming that at least 40% of the poodling tweets that day were directed at Eurofurence specifically. Some people thought the anti-poodling sentiments in the video reflected Eurofrence's official position on the subject, and people began asking if Eurofurence had an anti-poodling policy. It was a rumor they had to address 2 days later in a tweet stating that they currently did not and never have had a policy about poodling. So just how big of a deal was this? How much poodling related activity was there on Twitter? This graph shows the number of monthly poodle related tweets from January to July, just so you can see what normal looks like. And when we include everything from August to October, we get a pretty clear picture. Now this graph just looks at tweets, replies, and quote tweets. If we take retweets into account, this is what it looks like. So the numbers are telling us that this poodling drama was a very big deal to a lot of people. But it still hadn't reached everybody. Like many other furries, I was completely unaware of it at first. It wasn't until a few days later that I saw this retweeted on my Twitter feed. Now this tweet was meant as a joke, but it resonated with a lot of people and it reached a much larger audience than the original Eurofurence tweet did. It was at this stage that a lot of the conversation started to shift away from Eurofurence specifically, and it moved into a more general direction about anti-poodling sentiment. So coming into all that, I found myself reading through tweets saying things like, "You don't get to tell me how to enjoy my fursuit," or "If you don't want people to poodle, then you should pay for them to get a full suit." And to me, those are pretty strong statements, so I wanted to understand who they were responding to, who the bad guys were. The impression that I kept getting was that there was this sizable anti-poodling movement out there. It was strange to me. I didn't know poodling was something people cared this much about. But if this was actually a large group of people, I had a few things to say to them myself, and I was ready to tweet it. But I decided to hold off. It still felt like I was missing a lot of context. So instead of trying to piece together the whole story myself, I decided to see what furry YouTubers were saying about it, and they had a lot to say. Going through all these videos did help point me to Eurofurence as being the original source of the drama, and a lot of them offered some valuable context that I was missing. Something else I noticed that was consistent across a few of these videos was the tone.
Some people at Eurofurence are a bit elitist.
To everyone who hates poodlers out there, this is for you.
Stop being an asshole to furries who wear their fursuit the way they want.
Do me a favour, and now go get yourself a gun, put it against your head and pull the fucking trigger, because you're not worth people's fucking time if you can sit there being a pretentious piece of shit. And that is my message.
It definitely felt like these videos were made in an effort to push back against all the anti-poodlers out there. And there was one conclusion that all the YouTubers agreed on.
It's not about you. Let them be themselves and express themselves in the ways that they feel most comfortable.
It's your freaking suit, your performance, you do it as you want.
It's your suit and your character, so you get to decide.
Personally, I think poodling in general is just okay, as long as you're there for your own enjoyment.
Don't let others tell you how you should fursuit, because it's all up to you in that case.
This is such a non-issue. Poodling is such a non-issue. It doesn't matter.
Like, honestly, who cares?
You can wear your fursuit any way you choose. It is yours.
Poodling is okay, even when you have no choice. Do whatever makes you have a good time.
Let us express ourselves. People fursuit for their own reasons, to fulfill their fantasy, not yours.
So the narrative on YouTube was consistent. Poodling is okay. Poodling is valid, positivity across the board. And while it was great to see this much support, I still had no idea where all these anti-poodlers were, and I wasn't the only one feeling confused about that.
When I search up poodling on Twitter, nobody's tweeting about how much they hate it. So I'm kind of curious where this whole thing came from.
I honestly was looking through Twitter trying to find anybody that was actually complaining about poodling. Was there a real human being out there who was really complaining about poodling? I found one guy who's like, oh, you shouldn't poodle. And then everybody else was just like, yeah, oh my god, who cares about poodling? I'm look at me, I can show my skin too, I'm brave.
A lot of us were asking these questions. Where are all these anti-poodlers? How many are there? Should I be upset about any of this? These are important questions to ask, and I think it's about time that we answer them. So before we dive into what I found, let's go over a few key items, starting with my data source. I used Twitter's advanced search function to pull every tweet containing the word poodling for the first 10 months of 2019. Then, I set up a web scrape to pull all the data into a spreadsheet that you can find along with all my other sources in the video description below. Each tweet on the spreadsheet contains a link to the original tweet, which I included for verification purposes. Of course, you can always use Twitter search to find all this yourself, but the spreadsheet will contain data points from my audit, and I wanted to make that available to you in the spirit of transparency. A few things that were not captured in the web scrape: tweets with the word poodle, because I'd have to sift through all the posts about actual poodle dogs just to find the furry tweets. Any replies to poodling related tweets that didn't themselves contain the word poodling in that reply were not captured. Now, during my audit, I found that people who expressed anti-poodling sentiments generally fell into one of two groups. Group 1, people who didn't care for poodling but were mostly just expressing their personal preferences about it. This group includes statements like, I don't personally like poodling. This group does not include statements like, I don't personally like poodling, but nobody should ever tell you how to fursuit. Do what makes you happy. Poodle your heart out. I felt like I really couldn't count statements like these as being negative, at least not in good faith. On to group 2. These are people who are making tweets that could be classified as gatekeeping statements. When defining gatekeeping, I looked at a number of factors, in particular, tweets that conveyed things like people should not poodle or should not be allowed to poodle, poodling is not okay unless this or these specific circumstances exist, clear authoritative statements like you need to stop poodling, and stating or implying that it is the poodler's job to justify their reasons to poodle. Now, for every gatekeeping tweet, I reviewed the original Twitter thread to take into account the full context in which it was written. This also helped me weed out the false positives. For example, some tweets that said things like stop poodling turned out to be jokes, memes, playfulness between friends, and in those cases they were not flagged. And last but not least, a quick content warning. I didn't delete any data from this spreadsheet, so you will find some tweets that are not safe for work if you look through it. So fair warning. You've been warned. Alright, so of the total 5,007 tweets audited, 265 of them were not related to the furry fandom at all. There is a surprising number of political tweets using the word, and I guess poodling is also a term used by people in Europe, in a context that has nothing to do with furries? It's weird. You can find these in the spreadsheet if you're curious. The audit results were calculated from the remaining tweets that were fandom related. So we've got 4,742 tweets to work with here. And just how many of those were anti-poodling? The results were actually pretty shocking, because I found over 1,000 tweets basically saying that poodling should be banned. Tweets that were so mean, so elitist, so morally reprehensible. I'm just kidding, there were only 28. That's right. Out of the 4,742 tweets, I found that 28 could be classified as gatekeeping tweets, with an additional 67 stating that they simply didn't like poodling as a personal preference. The rest were either general tweets that happened to be about poodling or positive pro-poodling tweets. That works out to about 0.59% gatekeeping, 1.41% personal preference, and 98% being general or positive when looking at basic tweet counts. Now, if we include retweets, we're looking at 0.26% gatekeeping, 0.81% personal preference, and 98.93% general or positive. This means that for every 385 furries, you'll find just one furry who's strongly anti-poodling. 385 to 1. You would have better odds defending the Alamo than you would bashing poodling in public. Also, funny side note, during this audit I came across 320 tweets asking what is poodling. So there were 11 times more people asking what poodling is than there were people actually bashing it. So that settles it. There is no real opposition to poodling out there. It's a sham, a myth, a farce, a flim-flam. This is what we call a non-controversy. But then how did this happen? How could there have been this much uproar against a seemingly invisible opponent? I want to take a moment to go back to the beginning of this video, back to these 3 tweets we looked at. I asked you to think about how they made you feel, and assuming they were real, what actions you might feel compelled to take or not take. Would you just ignore them and keep scrolling? Would you have joked about them with a friend? Would you have considered doing something like this? Or maybe this is more your style. On social media, we spend all our time reacting to, well, each other, and those reactions are usually driven by impulse. The thing about impulse is they don't leave a lot of room for finesse, for thinking things through. By the time our brains have processed everything, it's far too late. I wouldn't go as far as to say that our impulses are the enemy here, but they've definitely been co-opted to work against us. When we see a bad take on something by some jerk who's just trying to stir the pot, that tweet, if left alone, will die in obscurity, seen by almost nobody. When we do things like this, we're pushing that content to our audiences, to our followers, many of whom will probably share it with their followers until it spreads across the community like a virus, gathering reactions and whipping us into a frenzy. And in no time at all, others will start tweeting their independent thoughts on the subject. Secondhand information becomes third-hand information, and context gets scrubbed away systematically. This is how things get so out of control so fast, and it's how poodling was transformed from a non-controversy into a controversy. We are facing an uphill battle against our impulses in a system that exploits them by design. But the only real way to make this better is for us to think more about what we say to our own audiences on social media. Because there are real controversies that we should signal boost. But when we signal boost everything all the time, the real problems that should be talked about, they get drowned out by all the nonsense, and it becomes almost impossible to tell them apart. I think that there are some important lessons that we can take from this poodling fiasco, and I really believe that this is an opportunity for us to take some positive steps. So the next time you get that impulse to weigh in on the next controversy that you see floating around, don't poodle it. Wait, did I just find a new way to use that word? Don't poodle it. Don't poodle it. I like it. So yeah, don't poodle it. Don't spread it around unless and until you've given it some careful thought. I think this is a good point for us to begin learning from our history. In other words, always remember the lessons of the Great Poodle War of 2019.
It's the war. War never changes.
Well, that's it for today's analysis episode. I really hope that you were able to take something valuable from this one. If you did, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more Kabba content. I also want to hear your thoughts on the subject. And if you think that I missed anything critical to this discussion, please let me know in the comments. To be honest, I'd love to hear other people talking more about it, or even doing their own analysis, because this is something we should be talking more about. Social media is not going away. And since we're all in this together, we may as well figure it out together. I'll see you next time. Take care.